That's looking good. All right. How's everyone doing? I'll give it everybody just a little bit of time. Let's there we go. There we go. Hey Russell, how are you doing? How are you doing? I was just giving everybody a little bit of time to filter in before we started the news. I really need to work on that animation, like that stream starting animation. I need to find. I actually have an animation. I need to now find some audio to licensable audio that I can put with it because I was looking at it. And I was like, kind of falls flat without something in the background. It's a really simple animation, but I worked hard at it. All right, so we didn't have a whole lot this week. This week really didn't have a whole lot. I have one blog article to read over with you all. I'm not super excited about it, but I thought we might just skim over it depending on how much we're liking it. So I'll do that at the end. We have a little bit of open source news to go over, some stuff in the CNCF that I'll cover in the cloud news. So yeah. So yeah, we have a couple of things. We have some open source that might be security related, but I'm putting in the putting in the open source instead of the security section. I guess I don't really have an open source section. Should I make that a section? Probably should. We'll put open source right after the cloud news. Let me rearrange those things really quickly. Do I have the burning out of overclocked AMD CPUs covered? No, I do not. No, I do not. Do you have a link? I can also Google it. Cool. I actually don't overclock my AMD. Yeah, I don't. I was going to like go into the reasons why I don't overclock, but overclocking has gotten better, but at the beginning when I did overclock, a lot of the times there was a lot of stability issues, and now I've actually found on Linux I underclock my laptop. It had a thermal throttling issue, and I found underclocking it made it just run better all around. Just slightly underclocking it. So I do a little bit of that, but not a lot. Thanks for the article. Right. Yep. I mean, and yeah, they're usually made to handle the voltage that they're designed to handle. Like, so I kind of go with this. Like, AMD wants their processor to be as fast as possible. If AMD now some of this you could be like, well, because they had to make it work with an air cooler or whatnot, but that's thermal throttling, and so like really they can work as fast as they can work, and then as soon as they get too hot, they'll just thermal throttle and it will be fine. So AMD is going to make their processor operate as fast as it can safely operate. If it could operate faster safely, they probably would. I mean, like that's if they had free hertz to give you, it would give it to you because they're the underdogs. So, anyways, that's generally my idea on it. It seems counterintuitive that no, and this isn't like, I know that there's like some enthusiasts that do a lot of like testing of cooling systems with like liquid nitrogen. That's all cool stuff, and if I had the money to blow on that, I would find it interesting. But yeah. All right. Well, I think this is plenty of time. Let's jump into this. And yeah, I got it. I just have read it a little bit while we're going, so I will cover that. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, so let's talk about security first. VMware fixes critical zero-day exploit chain used in the Pwn2Own. I bring this one up again. I've stopped bringing up a lot of the like random ones, but I'm trying to bring up ones I think could affect software engineers in general and things like that. So yeah, that means I pretty much, unless if I'm making fun of it, I don't talk about things like WordPress. But VMware, this actually was part of its Fusion workstation, which I know a lot of people use Fusion on their Mac and things like that. So I think this is probably a bigger deal to software engineers. If you do use Workstation and Fusion, they're hypervisors for Mac and Windows. Yeah, I don't think it works on Linux. I could be wrong, but you want to patch it because it's a pretty big exploit. And yeah. So, anyways, this could affect you, especially if you use it. Now we all know, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about some Linux hypervisors. We all know that they're better just because they're Linux. But yeah, if you do use this, I'm joking, by the way. There was another Git security vulnerability announced. So this one was a pair of security vulnerabilities. I don't know why with Git it seems like they always come in pairs. I'm not sure. They've been patched, so you should patch. There was window. There was extra vulnerabilities with Windows. But yeah. So, anyways, you should upgrade immediately. But yeah. So the former may be used to perform controlled content writes at arbitrary paths. This is actually pretty dangerous, depending on how you're using it. So yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna drop this if you guys are interested in more. But you should probably drop the link here. You probably should update your Git if you hadn't. So, yeah. All right. All right. So I don't personally use Superset, but Apache Superset is actually a pretty. It has a pretty big following for people who want to visualize their data. So I thought this was pretty relevant to you all. So I don't know if any of you are using Apache Superset, but if you are, you're going to want to be patching because there is a remote code execution vulnerability that was found on it. So this was originally developed by, I think it was Airbnb for data visualization. And yeah, anyways, you're going to want to update that if you haven't already. I have the Git security vulnerability in here twice. So we'll move on. Thankfully, AI is banned from running nuclear missile systems. So I didn't know that this was in the talks, but I'm glad that we have banned it now. I believe that there was a game called War Games. A game, not a game, a movie called War Games. And that's pretty much proven why we don't want this. But if push comes to shove, I know their vulnerability. I'm going to play chess with it. I'm going to make it play chess against itself. That's what I'm going to do. All right. That's it for security. Did you guys see anything else for security? Was there anything I missed this last week that happened? If so, let me know. Leave it in the comments. Come prepared. Be prepared. I think there's a song about be prepared. Next, we have cloud news. There wasn't too much happening in the cloud. There was a few minor things, and we're going to cover those, and then we'll get on. Actually, this week was a pretty light week. I don't know. I didn't see a whole lot. There wasn't a whole lot that I came across, but again, it's easy for me to miss. This is not my full-time job. That's why it's so awesome that you come prepared with links. Thank you, Russell, again. All right, so Azure Virtual Desktop features. So Azure Virtual Desktop is basically a computer in the cloud. It sounds pretty much what you might expect. And they came out with a bunch of new updates. So if you're using it or have been wanting to use it, but it lacks some of the features, there's some new features that came out for it. An interesting one that I saw was this watermarking on Azure Virtual Desktops. Basically, it's trying to help prevent the capture of sensitive information with watermarks. I don't actually know how that helps. I don't know exactly what they're doing there, like trying to keep you from screen recording it. But if it's just watermarking, you're just interested in the data. I'm not sure, but that is a thing. But yeah, there's a whole lot of other things here. I'm not going to go over each one of them. But yeah, they've made some improvements. On top of that, something a little bit more interesting here for me is the public preview of Azure Cosmos DB for Postgres. Data encryption with customer managed keys. This is a big deal. There's a lot of customers that want to manage their own keys for one reason or another. It can be part of their compliance, part of their security standpoint. There's a lot of reasons why companies want to be able to manage their own keys. So this is, I think this is a pretty big deal. I didn't actually realize that Cosmos DB for PostgreSQL didn't allow you to manage it with your own encryption keys before now. So yeah. Now that's not saying that it wasn't encrypted before. It was always encrypted with Microsoft's service managed keys. So it's not saying it wasn't encrypted. It's just saying that you can now bring your own keys, which is good. The general availability of Microsoft Azure general availability. I think they said, I don't know how you're supposed to read this. Microsoft Azure available from new cloud region in Poland. So if you're looking to expand in Europe, there is a new region in Poland, a new data center there for you to use. So if you're looking at that, doing that and expanding there, there's a new region. The other big thing that I know sometimes, so these new regions usually have, they usually start out with less types of VMs and fewer features. But if they have what you want, not a whole lot of people have moved there. And so if you're in a region that has a lot of constraints on the instance types and you're having a hard time finding the inventory that you need, sometimes you can move to these other regions and get the inventory that you need. If it happens to be what you need or what you can make work. So yeah. It's a sneaky secret. It's a trade secret. If that region works for you, obviously, you can't always just make whatever region. Anyways, that's all I saw for Azure. Did you guys see anything else for Azure? We'll move on to GCP or GCE. I don't know which one it is. Document AI offers the ability to search and store documents effectively with Document AI Warehouse. What's up, Monta? It's good to see you again. So basically, they have a Document AI Warehouse, which is like warehousing for document AIs. I haven't fully wrapped my head around what a Document AI Warehouse is. I did read through this. It sounded almost like a cross between. Yeah, it almost sounded like MongoDB just managed. I wasn't entirely sure. Although supposedly it's better for AI. So if you guys are doing AI and you're on GCP, you might want to check this out. You might want to check it out. Give it a check. Now this I can talk a little bit more about because I do understand this piece a little bit better than the other one, was announcing our Anthos hybrid environment reference architecture. Now I did bring this up a little bit ago where they talked about actually doing this, and I hailed it as a good idea because Anthos itself, yeah, actually, the clouds have had a pretty good quarter as far as all the doom and gloom around them goes. My understanding is that I think GCP had a fantastic quarter. I actually have one thing on that, not about the clouds specifically, but about how well some of these things have done. But yeah. So Anthos allows you to basically have GCP services on bare metal or in Azure if you want it as well. Yeah, Cloudflare wasn't horrible though. Well, Cloudflare wasn't horrible, but yeah, it wasn't good. I think it was actually more about we don't have to get into it here, but it wasn't as much of, am I actually being a little loud? Maybe I'm being a little loud. I'll talk a little softer. I don't think that Cloudflare was as much of, it was on bad guidance. Cloudflare said that there was weakness and that their sales pipeline was slowing down. Not that they necessarily had a horrible quarter. The quarter looked fine, not good, but fine. I didn't actually bring that up. I'll find an article on Cloudflare's release. Cloudflare's, yeah. All right, so Anthos is their multi-cloud thing, so you can use GCP or GCE resources in your cloud or whatnot. It's kind of like giving the GCP control plane anywhere. Now, it's a little deceiving because you still pay GCP prices even though it's on your bare metal. Like you still pay for it. So Anthos is kind of expensive. That's what I'll say. Now it's nice too. If you have built your entire architecture on GCP, and for maybe a bank wants you to be running in 2 clouds or something like that, you have some requirement that forces that. It's a pretty nice thing to do. Or the same, like you're starting to build out your data center and you want to be able to run. It's a pretty nice way to do it. Anyways, this is the reference architecture. And I'm going to link this in chat for everyone because one of my complaints, something I've told you guys about, is actually making an Anthos cloud is difficult, prone to error. If you think Kubernetes is difficult, this is amazingly difficult. And the other thing is there was no architecture of like, hey, this is the best way to set things up. And so this was really, really needed. So I'm glad that they've done this. I hope to see more of this type of stuff from not only them, but also Microsoft. And it's called AKS. No, it's EKS Anywhere. AWS has their own, although AWS is the worst by far. Worst by far. All right. Other than that, an interesting thing, especially if you're looking for like FIPS compliance. This is actually, I believe, goes beyond FIPS compliancy here. But if you're looking for the next generation of security, GCP has released their confidential VMs. Now, if you don't know what this is, it is bringing confidentiality to the entire stack. So you run a VM in your cloud providers, and I really think this is really cool. I think this is the future of cloud providers with shared things. And basically what it does is your VM gets encrypted by the processor. So you get encryption in use. So basically everything that happens with the processor and your VM gets its own encryption through the processor. So there is no commingling of your data and your information with somebody else's. This is probably, I would say, probably going to help with things like Spectre and Meltdown in the future, because one of the problems with the Spectre and Meltdown is if you can guess what branch prediction and things like that, you can trick the CPU into giving you data that wasn't yours or belonged to you. But if that data is encrypted, then it doesn't matter as much. It's at least protection. It's not going to actually help with those problems. It's going to protect you in case you were vulnerable and somebody took you up on that. So anyways, this is actually really good, really cool. Basically, they're confidential VMs. Everything from the data at rest at disk through in the CPU and memory, your data is signed by the AMD encrypted something or other on the chip. So not even Google has your encryption thing. It's all in that chip, on that processor, on that machine. It's actually pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I'm gonna leave a link to this because I think it is the way of the future. I could be wrong. And that was it for GCP. Do you guys have anything else? Anything else you saw for GCP or GCE? What do you call it? Let me know in the chat right now. Is it GCP or GCE? I think GCP is Google Cloud Platform and GCE is Google Cloud Endpoint. I don't know. I don't know what GCE stands for. I probably should. I use it all the time. Okay, let's move on. I mentioned this. Amazon Code Whisper. You call it GCP. I call it GCP as well. I was noticing that if you use Packer and you use HashiCorp Packer, it's specifically called GCE there. And it was confusing the crap out of me because I've never heard anybody talk about it that way. I am releasing a video on code enablement by these Copilot-like things. And I'm just letting you guys know, I talked about this, and I was actually really excited about Code Whisperer because while it is $19 a month per user, that is for administrator and organizations. But as an individual, it is free to use for generating code. And it is absolutely free to use, and that is fantastic. And I told you guys I was excited about that because it was a good alternative to Copilot. At this moment, and you'll see this in my video when I get around to making it. I'm going to try to make that video in the next month. Code Whisperer is unusable. It is unusable. It caused me more pain, more grief, more stress than anything else. This last week, I used it, and it slowed me down. I would have been done with more stuff if it wasn't for Code Whisperer. It's garbage. It's absolute garbage. All right, but we'll move on to some other stuff that wasn't as garbage. HashiCorp naming is the worst. Azure is called Azureum. That is, I haven't used HashiCorp with Azure, but that sounds pretty horrible. I don't know why they called it GCE, like Google Cloud Engineering or anything. All right, so AWS Graviton 3 based instances. I have told you guys before that if you don't need, if you can run on these, they really do have the price performance. I have asked some of these cloud companies if they would partner with me. I have sent AWS specifically because I wanted to do tests about exactly how much you would save, because I thought that would be a cool and interesting video. Haven't gotten a response back from them yet, because I don't really want to foot the bill for actually doing a real test on that. But the the M7Gs and the R7Gs are database instances. These are big, beefy machines to run your databases on. But not only that, they run really fast memory, which is important for databases. You wouldn't think about it. You think fast disk. They have the Nitro system as well. So they do have fast disk, which is important. But they also run fast DDR5 memory. And the reason that is important is your indexes, your things like that. It's not, I mean, obviously, if you're wanting to do like a Redis in-memory database, or Aerospike can run in-memory as well, that's fine. But I think actually these are costly. These are costly. Let me not. But if you're running a big database and you're wanting to store, petabytes of data, you want these big ones. So anyways, it's cool to see them release these database instances. So definitely give them a check if you're wanting to see them. They are super costly. Even though they're cheaper, they're like the i4Is. I think it's $10 an hour, which you're like, oh, that's like the smallest i4I is $10 an hour, and you're like, oh, that's not too bad. It doesn't sound too bad, but you're talking about $240 a day. That's fast math. Hopefully, I did it right. Okay, so AWS Fault Injector is something I've talked about. And I like, because I like testing things with faults. I love chaos engineering. As far as when you're going to test, I think injecting faults is phenomenal. And AWS Fault Injector now supports Amazon EC2 instance disk fill, which basically simulates a full disk on your instance, and is really a cool thing to do to test some of those things. So if you're running some stateful sets or stateful things, you're able to now do that, and it's generally available now. So it gives you the no space left on disk error. So yeah, you can now test how your application, how your system handles things like that. So this is really cool. I think if you're running on AWS, you should definitely be using this and leveraging this to its fullest. I think Fault Injector is single-handedly one of the best things to come to AWS. Obviously not Code Whisperer. All right. Last thing. This one I know I have covered, but I wanted to just bring it up again because if you're not watching for it, it could take you by surprise. Amazon S3 now applies two security best practices to all new buckets by default. That means the defaults are changing, so if you had planned on it to work one way, it might not work that one way anymore. So just to be cognizant of it. The first one is that they won't be public by default anymore. And then the second one has to do with their, one second, maybe they say here. It block all public access. So by default, they're not all public. And disabling the S3 access control list for all new S3 buckets. So you know what? I'll put this here. I'll put this in the chat because I know that S3 is a pretty common thing for people to use. So yeah. And that's it for Azure News. AWS News. I'm almost worse than HashiCorp. I'm just throwing out words. Do you guys see anything else in the clouds? I didn't see anything else in like the lead nodes or the DigitalOceans that were really big and noteworthy. I know that we talked a little bit about them having good quarters. I can bring up something on that really quickly. I'll go look for it. But I do believe that they had fairly decent quarters. Yeah, I mean, the headline is the company posts Google Q1 2023 cloud results. Google Cloud finally posts a profit. Revenues of $12.4 billion, up 18% year over year. Yeah, GCP looked like they did well. very, very well. Now, now that being said, I did also bring. I had this. Well, since we're talking about it as a whole, it seems like since I found this, and yeah, I was going to bring it up just because we're all software engineers. These are software engineering companies. Meta, commonly known as Facebook, rose more than 14% because it had a blast of a quarter. It was yeah, really good. Really good. Not stock advice. I'm just talking about how their revenue um they were 20 cents above the estimated revenue. They killed it. They were killing it. So, that's been generally what I see. I have generally seen except for Cloudflare. Cloudflare was the one which saddens me. I like Cloudflare. I like Cloudflare. Um and their quarter wasn't bad. Um honestly, I Cloudflare's wasn't all doom and gloom. It was just weak on forecast. I can bring that up, but that's generally what everybody said. They kind of met expectations and had weak forecasts. There was some like their total revenue was down, but their profit was up because they stopped hiring or something like that. I'm not entirely sure I understood all of it. Again, no financial advice here, but yeah, we have a little bit of. Oh, you know what? There's going to be an ad. I can't help it, and I don't know who of you gets the ad, so I'm going to not move on with the CNCF news. We're going to sit here and talk for just a little while until the ad is done. It says ad starting soon, but it doesn't allow me to start the ad now because I can usually manually run an ad. Are you guys seeing an ad? You know, if you use your Prime subscription on me, you don't have to watch ads. And if I could turn ads off, I would, but I can't. Every company mentioned. Yeah, revenue up because they stopped hiring. That was kind of my understanding of it from the Cloudflare was like their revenue was better than expected, but it wasn't because they sold better than they thought. There it was just because they had tightened the belt. Which again, I think Cloudflare is a fantastic company. I really really do. I think they do a lot of stuff right. I think, and I'm not gonna sit here and defend everything the CEO or whatnot has done. I don't follow them that closely, but if you're talking in general, I think they do a really good job of trying to make the internet a more secure space. And yeah, you know they offer a ton of stuff for free. I would pay for what they do for my null servers if they had like a really cheap plan. I would give them $5 a month because I could afford that. But yeah, but they provide it for free just to make the internet a little bit safer. Like yeah, that's okay, Monta. I was half joking. I mean, I would love it if somebody gave me a Prime, but it would stop you from seeing the ads. Said the ad is in progress for another minute and a half, so every company mentioned AI multiple times. It's like a magic word. You know what? I have something on AI coming up. It seems like okay. So I know that what was it? Chat GPT. Just since we're on the subject, they got a new round of funding, didn't they? I feel like they just got a new round of funding, but maybe I'm wrong. That's not what I want. Yeah, they just crushed a new round of funding. OpenAI closes 300 million round of funding at 27 to 29 billion valuation. So I was gonna put this in the news. I didn't. But yeah, they did just crush another round. I actually have questions about this. Like from what I've seen, OpenAI. From what I've seen, everyone from Llama and whatnot can replicate ChatGPT. To be honest, it was the first. But I don't see, and right now it might even be the best. I'm not even going to say might. It is the best right now. But I don't see that it has that much of a strategic advantage. Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't see it having a $30 billion strategic advantage over just about anybody else. These large language models, like, yeah, I don't know. We'll talk more about it because there is some more and new competition even in the open source world. I know that I've talked about some open source ones, and the reason I brought this up was Stability AI has released a new open source version. I'm gonna share a link to that. Yeah, I am surprised that Microsoft hasn't just bought them outright. Manta, don't get ads from you either, man. I don't get your Prime. I don't get your ad revenue. I get nothing from you. Nothing. Except fantastic company. So you just keep coming. That's fine. I was not complaining. Let's move on. I have an interesting thing here. I really like Linkerd, if none of you know. Linkerd is kind of like Istio, except simpler. Although Istio has made movement on becoming simpler itself, but Linkerd 2.13 has been released, and it comes with circuit breaking, something that's pretty useful if you need it. The dynamic request routing, I don't know. FIPS can be a pretty big deal if you're trying to if you need to be FIPS compliant, and health monitoring is a pretty big deal. So I'm gonna post this link down there for you all. I mean, that's I don't know that I'm right. To me, OpenAI for a large language model is the best that's out there. I just don't see it as a huge strategic advantage to something that people seem to be able to replicate fairly well. And they're burning like $700 million a day running the service. Or 70 million. Maybe it was 70 million. It was a lot of money. That they burn to run it every single day. I just am not sure. Yeah, I just don't know. I don't know. Anyways, back to this. I'm pretty excited about it. I like Linkerd. I think these are really cool features that they've added, and could be really helpful. So they've added fine-grained control over the routing of individual HTTP and gRPC requests. It does support gRPC, which is fantastic. So does Istio. I do love gRPC. I think circuit breaking is probably the biggest thing in this to me. So circuit break, it really, if you guys don't know what metastable errors are, it's something I've been wanting to make a video on. But metastable errors are basically errors that once they happen, you actually, so let's say you get this error when you get over 1 request per second. So if you get 2 requests per second, you're going to get this error. But you can handle 1 request per second. But a metastable error means that once it happens, going back to 1 request per second doesn't actually solve the problem, because your system needs actually less than whatever you can handle to recover from that error. And so circuit breaking can actually alleviate that. Basically, it gives you a way to automatically backstop something and say, no, this isn't working. And giving it more requests is actually going to cause it to fail more, even if those requests have slowed down. So circuit breaking can be a technique to help with a metastable. Now, usually if you have a metastable error, there's a deeper issue, but sometimes those deeper issues can either be hard to find, hard to understand, or not even viable to fix in the short term. And so that's where I think circuit breaking really comes in and helping. Automated health monitoring and vulnerability reporting, I think, is a big deal. Just understanding the health of, a lot of times people use these as their service meshes and things like that. So yeah, that's a pretty big deal. And the FIPS 140, 142 and 143. I don't know the difference between them off the top of my head, but that's a pretty big deal. So really cool to see that. Yeah, it's an interesting problem. It's an interesting problem. On that, the open source devs finally get a taste of full strength Slasa. Slasa? This is actually a better article on Slasa from Google. I wanted to bring that up here because it's not a Google thing. It's the Open Source Security Foundation, or Open SASF. But the Google article is actually pretty good. So I'm gonna drop this link. So Russell, the claim about the Google engineer, it's hard. It's hard to know. Because when you're in that position, like, I'm going to choose my words carefully here. And trust me that I say this with like the best intent. But if you're in that position, it is in your best interest to hype up something one way or another. And I'm not even saying that Google doesn't have something better than Bard, because Bard is pretty garbage. So I think that they do. Hopefully they do. Because Bard is, from my testing, is garbage. Is absolutely worse than the other ones that are out there. It looks like they rushed it out. Okay, it's not as bad as Code Whisperer. Code Whisperer is worse. So it's not that bad. But it's not as nice as like ChatGPT and some of the other stuff. But it is in your best interest to I struggle with that one. I think that it can be very hard not to hype it up more than what it is, because that's in your best interest, and you're on the place where you got fired from that. And again, not necessarily saying I doubt what he said. But yeah, a lot can go into that type of conversation. You're in the spotlight, and a lot of us aren't accustomed to being in the spot. I'm not accustomed to being in the spotlight. I have videos that have had thousands of views, and I would still not be accustomed to that. So I don't know. It can be difficult. I guess I'm just saying I don't know how to take that information. Yeah. All right. So Slasa, an end-to-end framework for supply chain integrity for open source. This has kind of been in the works since the SolarWinds hack on Microsoft and that supply chain issue. And the real problem was that there was no comprehensive end-to-end framework that both defines how to migrate threats across the supply chain. So this is they pronounce it salsa. I'm pronouncing it slasa. If you wanted it salsa, you put an A in there. This is slasa. Is this? So we can look at this. I'm gonna post this in here. I think everybody probably should start to get accustomed to these things. Russell, I agree with you, But not everybody is thinking that way in the moment, if that makes sense. I think the rational thing would be to just try to disappear. But you can try to reach for fame from something like that. There's a lot of emotions that go into that. I've been wrong before. I've been wrong on stream before. And there's a lot that goes into that. And everything is happening to you at once. So, okay. So this is a pretty big deal. Google's right up here. I'm going to post this along with it. It goes pretty well into like how it can help. If you go and just read this, it's a little bit difficult to understand exactly, but Google actually did a really good job of breaking it down. So basically working on source identity and build integrity, and basically how they give ratings to projects. So basically, their idea here is to be able to give like quantifiable ratings to projects based off of these best practices. That allows you to see how well a project is rated and whether you want to use it or whatnot. And yeah, it's pretty good. I think everybody should start to get familiar with this, especially if you want to work in open source, because I think meeting these is going to be really good. So there's these different levels that have different requirements. So SLASA 4 is like the highest level, and I think that this is really, really good. Although reproducible builds should be in SLASA 1. I argued for this. Reproducible builds should be across the board, but whatever. If you can't do reproducible builds, I thought that was so 2010. Okay. So anyways, good article. Reproducible builds should be there. Number 1. All right, let's move on to something I'm pretty interested in. System 76 has released some new laptops. I have said if I get the chance to buy a new laptop in the near future, not even in the near future, because I probably won't buy a laptop in the near future, but if I do, and I get the choice of laptop to get, I actually would like to get a laptop meant to run Linux. And they released a brand new set of Linux laptops. So yeah. Now these do come with Intel. They do have a AMD laptop, which I'm kind of excited about. So yeah, I just thought I'd let you guys know. Open source hardware. I don't know if the hardware is not open source. I don't think I don't think it's open source, but they do build them to run Linux. So yeah. Going on with open source, Bookworm is planned for early June. So early June, we will get Debian 12. Bookworm is Debian 12. So if you're following that, Debian is one of the oldest distributions out there. It's what Ubuntu's then built on top of, and it's one of the big founding releases. You look at Red Hat and you look at Debian. And pretty much everybody else, even like SUSE, uses RPM, Red Hat. And, Ubuntu uses Deb, now Snap as well. But anyways, so there's a lot of stuff coming to it. I'm pretty excited about. And yeah, lots of updates, lots of testing done. Pretty cool. In this open source talking, we have a pretty big update that I'm pretty excited about. We have talked about RISC a lot. And a lot of times people have asked like, oh, well, can I just emulate RISC? And previously to QEMU 8, the answer has been no, not really. But with QEMU version 8, they have brought better support to RISC processors. So if you don't know what QEMU is, it's usually used alongside KVM. KVM is virtualization on Linux. And with QEMU, it allows you to virtualize things like ARM. So that's why I can virtualize an ARM server on my Intel machine or my AMD machine, my AMD 64 machine. So KVM is like the hypervisor, or is the kernel hypervisor, and QEMU is the emulator if you want to emulate a different architecture. So I'm really excited about this because there's a ton of virtualization improvements and emulation for RISC. So yeah. Now, there's obviously also more support for other things as well if you're interested in ARM. It's done ARM really well prior to this, but anyways, I'm excited that it's out. QEMU version 8 is out. Go use it. Have fun. Remember to VM responsibly. While we're talking about open source, Stability AI released Stable LM, which is a lightweight ChatGPT counterpart. I know that there's actually been several large language models out there. This is like a medium language model. It's like 13 billion, please. Medium at best. Nowadays, if you're not in the trillions, you're not a large language model. So it's out there, 7 billion, 13 billion, 15 and 30 billion models. I don't think you run these on a local machine, but the 7 billion is something we might be able to run locally. The 7 billion is maybe what we can do. Not only that, Hugging Face came out with their own Hugging Chat. Who is better, you or ChatGPT? It works pretty well. That's a pretty fantastic answer. That's actually a pretty fantastic answer. Like I said, a lot of these are coming out. This is the Open Assistant model down here. So again, if you're talking about open sourcing these large language models, this was built on Facebook's Llama. When do you expect to see PC vendors start to... I think that is going to be... I actually even think that it's already the big deal. It's already a big deal and people don't realize it. If you look at like NVIDIA, what sets NVIDIA GPUs, besides their API that's in a lot of training things, what sets their GPU apart from AMD GPUs? I would say that it is their ability to render at 10K and have an AI upscale that to 4K. So you can have the same load on the GPU that you do for 1080p and have a pretty awesome 4K image. And all of that is AI powered by a special AI chip. So I think the future's already here with that. Now, if you're talking about AI at home or AI in the cupboard, that would terrify me. I don't need it in the cupboard. Which cup should I use today? Oh, I think the cup on the left would be the is cleaner. I saw your children touch the one on the left. Never mind. I need that. I need that right now. Honestly, now that I think about it, AI in my cupboard is something I need. But I think specialty hardware in your laptop, I think that. Yeah, I did literally just sell myself on it live on stream. Wait till you have children and the invasion of privacy to be to ensure. All of a sudden you're like, yes, that's what I need. But also like security. I think what it would be a really good thing is unauthorized access on your computer. I think a password is really bad, but if you had an AI that could learn how you work and to message me on my phone and be like, hey, are you on your computer? Because this doesn't look like your normal behavior. It's not how you type. It's not how you use the mouse. Maybe I use the mouse in a different way. Like I always arc up and now I'm arcing down. I don't know, but you could have a local AI with dedicated hardware tracking that stuff and understanding who I am. I think that's fantastic. And I think that type of hardware should be coming out. because you don't want to do that on your CPU. You'd want a piece of hardware that does that type of stuff, a piece of security hardware. So. What serverless databases as a service accomplish? I only brought this up. Okay, so I looked through their other blogs after I found this. This was after KubeCon. They released this. Serverless databases as a service. This is so many keywords that I was like, I don't even know what it means. A database as a service, to me, is a database that I don't have to worry about clusters of databases. I don't have to worry about the machines. I don't have to worry about anything. I have an API. I say I want a database with a terabyte of data. That's a database as a service. And so then I was like, what is serverless database as a service? They even went to the effort of giving it SDBAS, so SDBAS. So SDBAS is serverless database as a service. And I learned that Redis thinks a database as a service is a SDBAS. What is a serverless database as a service? It is a database service that eliminates the need for developers to manage clusters or nodes. What is a database as a service then? My goodness, I hate... Anyways, I got pretty upset about this because obviously they just made up a new word and made a blog about an already old word. So then I was like, are all their blog posts this bad? And I found this one. And I was like, holy crap, this is a fantastic blog. So I'm going to give you guys the link to it because I read it because I was going to make more fun of them. Right. As a service should mean that I don't have to maintain it. Also, people expecting their first child remember to buy ceiling mounted cupboards that are 5 feet off the ground. Yes. You know why cupboards are up high? It's not because you don't want to bend down. It's because it keeps them away from your kids. My goodness, then they turn 12 and they can reach them, and it's a pain. It's a pain that we all have to live with. So anyways, I was like, as a service to me means I don't have to manage those things. This is just like throwing a keyword into it. But this was fantastic. I give them credit for it because credit is due. If you watched my Kubernetes doesn't have a problem and my microlith videos, because I think that people misunderstand microservices, this was 100% in line with it. Misconception, microservices solve all your problems. They go into how it can cause problems. Microservices reduce complexity. In fact, they cause complexity. One architecture works for everything. Microservices aren't the answer to every problem. Microservices are primarily a technology. No, microservices are a way, but really they solve a business or organization scalability problem. I love this article. I love this blog post. I had to bring it up because it resonated so well with me. Now, I disagree some with them. Misconception, microservices allow teams to use their preferred technology. I would say that this is actually not a misconception. To a point. If a team wants to write a microservice in Java and another one wants to write it in Go, they can. But if we are going to say that we're communicating with gRPC, they all have to communicate with gRPC. So there is some shared understanding. If you have an event service, you got to use that event service. You can't just pick another event service. You gotta be part of the system still. If it's a steam engine, you got to use steam. If it's a gas engine, you got to use gas. If it's electric, you got to use electricity. You can't just pick a different power source. So I would say this isn't a misconception. Microsoft, anyways, I like this article. So I flame them for this article. And to give them credit, they have some good articles. So I just had to point that out, that they had a good one that I liked. You need to sit down with that team and have an intervention is what you need. You want to use Java? What? What? You, sir, need an intervention. Who says, I want to use Java for this microservice? Touche. All right, this one was brought to us by the community. I haven't read a whole lot about it, but AMD's new Ryzen CPUs are randomly burning out. Here's everything we know. Now, what I've heard from Russell and the people that reported it is that it is from people that are overclocking their CPUs, especially the 3D ones. So the ones that have the 3D cache that just came out very recently. So yeah, it's something to be watching out for. And if you have a Ryzen 9 processor and wanted to overclock it, I might think twice. I already said, like, my personal opinion on some of this stuff here is that AMD wants that processor to run as fast as possible. There's no reason for them to artificially limit how fast it can run, because it's only more like, if it could run at 6 gigahertz, they would make it run at 6 gigahertz because that makes them look better in front of their competitors. So yeah, anyways, overclockers, beware. If that's you, beware. All right, that's it for my news segment. I do have this one article. You guys didn't find an article for me, but if you do find an article that you think would be fun to have me read and go over with you guys, let me know, and you can leave it in Discord. You can bring it here to me if you want. The whole idea is I haven't read it beforehand. That's the whole idea. All right. So this one I found, and it was 10 tips to become a better programmer and software developer in 2023. I thought this would be fun. I want to go quickly over it. I don't want to delve. This guy wrote a ton. I didn't read it, but like, it's a lot of words. Lots of words. We just should look at each high level tip and see if it's good advice or bad advice. We'll rate each one. Hello, folks. Whoa. If you want to become a better developer and looking for some solid tips, then you have come to the right place. In the past, I have shared. I don't know why this is my reading voice, but this is my reading voice. I'm sorry. I know it's kind of dramatic, but that's all I can do when I'm reading out loud. I have shared a lot of roadmaps, like the 2023. Oh no, it's a Java developer. Oh no. Oh no. Okay, at least he used JavaScript. I don't know if that's better or worse. Many Java developers ask me how to become a better programmer. I did not know this before this. I did not know this. How do I improve my programming skills? Step 1, stop using Java. Also, I'm sorry if some of you use Java. I know I like hating on Java. Java is like C++. Everybody likes to hate on it. Or, I'm good at Java, but not so good at problem-solving ability. I think this is true about every Java developer. It's hard to solve problems with Java. That's just the problem. Okay, I'll stop on the Java jokes. This is reality. Today's era is full of language experts than real programmers. I actually don't see this. This is the reality. Everybody's full. I don't feel like I see a whole bunch of language experts, honestly. I don't consider myself a language expert in any language. There are a few people I look to as language experts, but they're like your Bram Strofstropfen. That's the guy that created the C++. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce his last name for the life of me. There are definitely people that are, and I've worked with some, but I would say that language experts are few and far between. It's easy to understand keywords, methods, and APIs of the Java programming. This doesn't make you a language expert. Just to be honest, knowing the keywords, I understand the keywords. But understanding how to leverage those effectively is so much more. That's what makes you a language expert. You actually knew who I meant from that pronunciation? I'm sorry to the dude. Like, I would love to have him like repeat his name to me several times, and I would love to learn it. Brilliant guy. I cannot pronounce the name for the life of me. At the same time, it's challenging to solve practical problems, design reusable and robust software, and get that. Yes. Okay. I often see Java programmers who are not doing well when they ask to design and code a solution in a limited time, but at the same time, they are really good with Java concepts and all theories. I think this is separating problem solving from language concepts, which is different, but also understanding Java concepts doesn't necessarily make you a language, like a master of the language. Even senior programmers with 4 to 6 years, I wouldn't consider 4 to 6 years a senior programmer, but experience in Java programming sometimes fail to solve questions like designing coffee maker, coding vending machine, or sometimes even reversing a linked list. Reversing a linked list is tough, dude. I may be just moving off from being a better programmer, but it's essential to know your limitations when you work out to resolve those. If you're feeling resistant in coding, then you should code as much as possible. I agree with this. Solve some problems. Work outside your comfort zone. If you feel stressed and lost in designing using object-oriented analysis design, you should do a design using a pen and paper as much as possible. I don't know if I agree. Let's move on to the tips. 10 tips. Coding. I agree with this one. Doing it. Just be a doer. Why I put coding on the top of the list? Because it's the most difficult, and at the same time, it is a central piece of programming. Absolutely. You realize your mistakes. I don't know that people actually realize their mistakes. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, honestly, let's go back to that linked list. Designing a coffee maker, coding a vending machine, or even reversing a linked list, all of these sound like things I don't do in real life. Do you know what I love as a coding problem? Is when they have a demo app and they say, make it work and then fix the tests. I love that as a coding problem. I actually write real code. I actually have real problems. Like, there'll be some like simple things to catch, and then there'll be some really hard tests to fix. That is the best coding challenge I have ever done because it feels like real life. I feel comfortable doing it, and it shows me with debugging skills, it shows me with thinking skills, and then sometimes they'll even have like add this new feature to the app. Like if you get done with all the other stuff in your hour. I think that is the best thing that you can do. I really do. I have never in real life reversed a linked list. Not once. Not once. Not that I can't do it. I just never done it in real life. By doing coding, you also realize mistakes. I think if you're coding, I think you need to be very retrospective in your coding. If you're doing the coding to learn, you can't just be typing code because you'll never realize your mistakes. The mistakes are behind you. You haven't learned from them. Yeah, if you're an established product company, most of the job is reading the existing code and understanding what it does, then fix and add to it. Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're going to code, don't just go code something. I think if you're going to go code to an open source project. If you get PRs accepted to an open source project and accepted by the community, that is fantastic because somebody else is going to review it and help you with your retrospective. Hopefully they're nice, and hopefully they review that and show you where you could improve. Because if you're just coding in a silo, it's actually hard to see some of your mistakes, especially if it's not something that's in production that fails on you. I'm not sure if I like the clean code. A better book is The Pragmatic Programmer, I believe. Designing data-intensive applications and The Pragmatic Programmer, I think, would be my top of the recommendation. I don't know that I'm a big fan of clean code. Reading books is good. Like I said, I have a list. You start with designing data-intensive applications, and you move on to Pragmatic Programmer. I don't think this makes you a better programmer. I think this makes you better at passing interviews. To a certain extent. Let me rephrase that. I do think that data structures, algorithm, and system, especially system design, I think that we have too few people that actually understand system design. So this is probably a much bigger deal. Algorithms, you need to understand them at a certain level, and then I don't think they actually make you a better developer. Again, that's a certain level. Not a lot of people get to that level, but it's not like you need to be able to tell me how A star works or how it's even different than I even forgot the name of the iteration of it before A star, which was the Russian dude's name. The Russian mathematician came up with it, and it wasn't A star at the time. It was his last name. Dijkstra's. Thank you, Dijkstra's. Knowing those algorithms off the top of your head probably doesn't actually help, but knowing or understanding the concepts they use to come to the solution can be very powerful. I wish we would focus on that. Understanding why an algorithm works the way it does and how to better leverage that in the future or when you're thinking about a problem. Because very rarely do I think, oh, I need to just program up Dijkstra's algorithm or A star or whatever. That's very rarely my problem. Now, sometimes I can think about how that solved the problem and what type of problem they were trying to solve, and whether that's a good algorithm to use to try to solve my problem. So I think, yeah. Hash map. Hash map's always the solution to a data structure problem. I don't know. I didn't go to school for these, but these seem very standard and straightforward to me. I didn't go to school for software engineering, and these are very simple. There's not a ton of data structures from, you'll have your arrays, your linked lists, your hash maps, your sets, your whatnot, but like your trees. And there's a couple different types of trees. Like, I don't know. All right, I put open source contribution up here in coding. It should be in coding. Don't code in a silo. That's not going to help you. This is going to help you. Learning to recognize the underlying problem is the important thing. And I don't think that's easy to do in an interview. To see if somebody can understand the underlying problem. That is actually like, I can't tell you how many times where it's like people come to me and they're like, hey, I don't know what's wrong here. And for me, and maybe it's just a lot of experience, it's fairly easy to come to the underlying problem. Or even just have a guess at what the underlying problem is. But this is what I was saying, the open source contribution, don't code in a silo. If you want to get better, put your code somewhere where it's going to be tested. Go contribute to a Kubernetes project. Go contribute to an Apache project if you're Java. Go contribute to those, because that code, those people are going to be nice. I'm not going to say that. I've almost never been shamed for an open source thing. Don't contribute to the Linux kernel, because he's a jerk. But just about everywhere else, if they don't like your code, they'll say that they don't like it, but they'll give you feedback about why they don't like it. And usually they work to help you get it merged in. They actively are trying to get you involved in understanding the project. So generally, they don't say, no, we don't want this. They say, hey, have you thought about this error state? Have you thought about this? This is a good way to becoming a better programmer if you're really wanting to put the time into it. Reading good blogs. This is difficult. I don't recommend this. If you don't understand enough, blogs are just going to mislead you. There's so many bad blogs out there that, like, it's so easy to be. I disagree with this. Just because what defines a good blog? There's so many times, a friend of mine has actually made fun of me where I try to be a little bit ambiguous, where I'll say something like, this isn't right for everyone, because I'm trying to state like, hey, look, this is a tool. and it solves a very specific problem. But you have to understand your problem and if this thing actually helps. It's like microservices. What are you trying to solve with microservices? You need to know that before you implement microservices. So just because I release something that says, hey, microservices are cool because that you can do this thing with them and it's awesome, doesn't mean that you should just go use microservices. So even good blogs can be misleading because if you don't understand enough as to why the problems that are being solved in the blog are not your problems, then it can mislead you. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, I read blogs, but you have to read them with being critical of it. And not just because I don't trust the people. I don't trust the people, but yeah. Reading code, I don't know. This is how I learned to code. So I think this is a good one. If you go check out some code. But you have to be careful about this one too. Languages change as time goes on, and just because there was something that was done in an old code base doesn't necessarily mean it's the best thing to do now. Thinking off the top of my head, Kubernetes API machinery was written in such a way to get around the fact that there wasn't generics. And now with generics in 120 of Go, you can absolutely use them. And some of the stuff there is bad, just bad. So you got to be careful with that. Blogs are also going to get worse thanks to grifters with ChatGPT access. 100% Russell. The worst part about ChatGPT and Hugging Chat is that they can write something that sounds good and is terrible. Ask me about Code Whisperer. I'm going to complain about Code Whisperer for a long time. It gave me the most horrible nonsense every single recommendation. And then worst thing is it would try to interject itself while I was typing something and I couldn't see what I was typing because it pushed it off the screen. I was so mad about it. So mad. Writing unit tests. I think this will make you a better developer. Figuring out how to test code, figuring out how to update code to be able to be tested. Writing integration tests is another really good one. Now, I would not use mocks. Maybe it's a Java thing. I actually have commented that I think that there's this thing called AI poisoning where people maliciously poison an AI with bad data. But I think maybe AI decay is what we're going to see. I think AI decay is a real thing because the more things they're trained from, if they're trained from other AI stuff, we've actually seen this. Facebook did a thing where they had two AIs train each other and they basically went to nonsense. And so I guess we'll call it AI decay. I think AI decay is going to be something that's hard for these people to keep track of because you need so much data. It's going to be hard to make sure that it's good, unique data. Not impossible, but that's going to be a chore. But yeah, I don't know. I think mocks can be used, but you should use mocks sparingly. Mocks should be used sparingly. If you're using mocks all over the place, it means you need an integration test, not a unit test. That's what it means. And if you're not using an integration test and you're using a mock, you're testing nothing. You're testing absolutely nothing. Doing code reviews, absolutely gold standard for getting better as an engineer. I have said that a code review is a two-way street. It's a great place to learn, and I even use it to learn. Maybe a future human-only job, filtering data for AI to learn from. Maybe. Code reviews are fantastic. You can go do a code review and you can just ask questions like, hey, I don't know if this would be a better way. And maybe the person comes back and says, no, this is the better way because of X, Y, and Z. And you hadn't thought about X, Y, and Z. And you can learn something from them. I think code reviews are this is one of the things that I push new developers to do. Go do code reviews. A lot of them think, oh, I can't do a code review because I don't know enough. Now, you don't know enough to go be like, this is how it should be done, but you can go review the code, try to understand it, and ask questions. You're saying mocks are code isolation? I don't know that I agree with that. To me, a mock is I should have written an integration test and didn't. Maybe that's a little harsh. That's what I generally think of. This was too hard to write an integration test. I wrote a mock. Not always, but like 80% of the times I see them. Talking to a fellow programmer, yeah. Don't do this. Don't do this. I don't know about those. I don't know why commenting on blogs is going to make you better. I don't know if participating in Stack Overflow and forums is going to help. Maybe. I feel like that's really not... I don't know what you get from this. If you know the answer and can help somebody with Stack Overflow, that's fantastic. I don't know how that makes you better. You're not actively debugging something. They're asking a question, looking for an answer. I don't know that those actively make you better. Maybe I'm wrong with that. I don't know. Talking to I used to be a pretty competitive swimmer, and I had a coach that told me something that I have carried with me. More practice doesn't make your technique better. Weeby Wizard. Advent of Code is fantastic. Advent of Code is fantastic, and I'll tell you the one reason I think it's fantastic. Let me talk about this one last point, and then we'll talk about what I think you should take out of Advent of Code and what it forces you to do and why I think it's fantastic. Talking to a fellow programmer. What I was going to say with this is I had a coach that said, more practice doesn't make your technique better. Practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So basically what he meant by that, and what I took away from that, was you have to work at practicing the best that you can. Just doing the wrong thing more doesn't make you any better. And this is why I say, up at the top here, he said coding, and I said, you have to contribute it to an open source project that's getting reviewed by people. You can't code in the silo because you need to do perfect practice. None of us are perfect, and that's understandable. But this is why I say it's important to be doing it to an open source project, or have someone that's reviewing it that can help you with that perfect practice. Because just practice is not... I don't hold to the practice makes perfect. That's I guess that's my thing is I don't like practice makes perfect, because if you're practicing bad habits, you're not getting any better. You're just practicing the same bad things over and over and over again. And that was my big critique of coding. I think writing more code is the better way of getting better. Absolutely. All right, Advent of Code. Wait, let me... Russell. But the mock test should run in milliseconds. Integration test takes seconds. Mocks for unit tests can be useful. I said 80%. Mocks for unit tests can be useful. I agree. I think too often they are used because they didn't want to make an integration test. And too often, the thing that you're mocking hasn't been abstracted away enough to test the rest of your code without mocking it. So by that I mean, like, I shouldn't have to mock file access to test my sorting algorithm. I shouldn't have to mock file IO to test my indexing. Those are types of things where like I think those should be isolated enough to not have to mock. But if I'm needing to mock file IO for those things, then that means that I haven't written the code in a way that I can test those things effectively without writing a mock. So I guess it's not just I should have had an integration test. I guess there's also the code should have been written in a way to not need a mock for that. All right. As far as advent of code, and I'm not saying all mocks are bad. I'm not saying that. I think they're used as a crutch too often. Maybe my percentages are off. I just think that they're used as a crutch too often. I think integration tests are more useful than unit tests with mocks. But as far as the advent of code question, advent of code does one thing that I think is super powerful. And if you go in thinking about this, I think this is the big superpower of advent of code. And I'm going to actually stream advent of code this year. I don't know if I'll take time off. We'll see if I take time off or can take time off. I'm going to stream advent of code. We'll do it in maybe Rust, maybe another language. We'll see. The one thing I've always taken away from advent of code, there's two things, but one major. The big major one is advent of code has these two-stage problems. And the glorious, glorious thing about the two-stage problem is that it always, without a doubt, without failure, advent of code requires you to rethink how you wrote the first part. How you solved the first part does not work for the second part, almost without doubt. Almost without doubt. Almost without doubt, I need to come up with a pyramid of testing. Your solution to the first part of the problem doesn't work for the second part of the problem. And I think that's actually the beautiful part about it. Because as you go, you start to think about writing your code in such a way that you can change it later without more work. So I used to have this where I'm like, I just have to rewrite all of it. And sometimes I still do. I'm like, this doesn't work at all. And I have to start over. And that still happens to me. But as I've gone, I've learned to write my code in a way where that doesn't happen nearly as much. Because I know advent of code is going to force me to do that. And I think that's actually a really valuable lesson for writing code in day-to-day life. How can I write this so that I can reuse and mutate it and make it grow in a same way where the answer isn't, well, let me rewrite that part. That is the biggest thing I take away from advent of code. The second thing is problem solving. I think that while their problems edge on the verge of that programming challenge-esque, not real world problem. They're not real world problems, but they're in a kind of a happy middle ground, especially up to like day 15. Past day 15, some of them get pretty extreme, but prior to day 15, they're actually pretty good with, we have a problem, let's think through and solve it. And not all of them follow these standard algorithms and things like that. So I think that those are the two big takeaways. The only thing you take away from advent of code is that you hate Santa's elves and that they're so needy. Okay, touche. Third thing that I take away from advent of code. But I really do think that advent of code is a great thing, a great way to learn. I think that it would be best if you had somebody help you review your code if you're really trying to learn from it. But I think you can learn by yourself on it. But those are the big lessons that I take away, that I learned from it. is the general problem solving. I have a problem. Let me come to an answer. Let me come to a solution. Let me figure out that there's an edge case, because there's always a freaking edge case in the second part that you haven't thought about and haven't dealt with. How am I going to deal with the edge case? Do I rewrite it? Do I redo this? I don't know. And then writing your code in such a way that you plan on changing it. It's glorious. It's good. And Santa elves are so needy. They can't do anything for themselves. I agree, Russell. If you're just starting out, this was to level up as a developer. This article specifically was. So I wasn't thinking of just starting out. I don't know. I feel like my daughter could do the first 5 levels in Python. Should we do that? Should we see if she can do the first 5 days? She might not. That might be too frustrating. Maybe she can help me. Maybe she can help me do the first 5 days. The first 5 days are generally pretty easy. But yes, for leveling up, if you're new, Advent of Code can be rough. But if you'd like to see me work through it and think that would be a good learning experience, I'll do that. I'll at least do the first. I feel like past day 15, I don't have enough time to actually solve them. I'm not brilliant enough to see it, and I'm not a competitive programmer. I can't just see it and be like, I have the solution. They get too involved. They get too involved for me. I'm sure that there's better programmers that can solve them in 30 minutes to an hour. Past day 15, it's more than an hour. It's more than an hour for me. They get pretty hard. And in Rust, it takes more time. Actually, I really hate this because, like, the 2 languages I know well aren't good for a lot of this stuff. They're just not good for. It's like, oh, I took one interview and they're like, oh, you know Go. And they're like, you can take the test in Go. And it was like some data structure problem. And I was like, well, I probably would use a set here, but Go doesn't have a set. And so I'm going to use a hash map as a set. But I understand that's not really the right thing to use. But I was like, it's not, they're not good for this. The other problem, Go doesn't really do like character things. So it's like reverse this string. And I'm like, oh, in just about any language, this would be easy. But the language that I know, reversing a string is hard. Gosh dang it. Go doesn't have a set. No, it didn't have generics. It had a hash map and it had slices. That's what it had. If that's not what you needed an array, or you needed a slice, or you needed a hash map. Yeah, once they get long, I can't do that either. But I'm happy to do them for as long as I can. I can probably dedicate an hour a day, and maybe we can do one of the bigger ones on a Saturday, because I do think that they teach you valuable lessons, and doing the harder ones are good. Actually, probably what I need to do next year is do up to like 15 through December, and then from throughout the year, I need to do one a month. That's probably a good, yeah. But yeah, Go doesn't have sets. Stupid Go. And then if you want to manipulate a string, you have to get runes, and it's just not code you ever write in real life. And it doesn't do it well either. It just sucks. It just doesn't like doing those types of problems. And you're just like, yeah, and this is the language I know well, so shoot me. So I know I'm not doing well on this interview. I'm using Go. Thank you very much. There's a Reddit post that details every problem and categorizes it. You mean an advent of code? Oh, that would be good. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. All right, well, I'm going to get going. It is dinner time. I probably need to go make dinner. I have some starving children to go feed. And yeah, so thanks everyone for joining me for the news. I had fun as usual. And I look forward to seeing some of you on Tuesday. And as usual, have a fantastic week.